Hello everyone, and welcome to this very first Mastering Life short. It's my new webinar series that will be taking place every Monday at 6:30 p.m. in the UK. And my idea in this webinar series is to help LGBT plus and kinky people lead more wholehearted, fulfilled and satisfied lives. In each one of these webinars, I will be spending just 10 to 15 minutes looking at maybe one or two tools or ideas that are going to be drawn from psychology or coaching or business and leadership development. And the idea being that you will be able to live a more fulfilled life, both in your work life, but also in your relationships and your personal life. And in this first webinar is very much bringing that together in the idea of Venn diagrams and how Venn diagrams can help us to look holistically at our lives and everything we do. So through this whole webinar, then I sort of explain the series as it's going on. Now, this webinar is only part of the story. So each week I will do this 10 to 15 minute webinar, but there will also be a worksheet that you can download from my website, englishleathermaster.com/mastering-life-shorts. And that worksheet will be able to build on the ideas from this webinar. The worksheet is password protected though, so you'll have to have seen the webinar in order to get this. And if you miss the webinar, then I will be putting the webinars each week on YouTube. So getting straight into today's webinar, just to sort of give an example of where I'm coming from with all of this and why I think this is something that's worth talking about. In the past, in my previous job before I became a life coach, I was your average businessman. I worked in education. I was a consultant and a salesman and a teacher and a trainer, working across the world, and as you see here, giving presentations. At the same time, I had my personal life, and I was particularly involved in the BDSM world, and I owned slaves, and I got a lot of enjoyment from that. And at the time, I rather felt that those two worlds were not anything to do with each other. They didn't mix. However, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had skills in one area that were helping the other area. So, for example, to be able to have the confidence to present, I needed to build a certain personality as the person who was in front of these groups of people, and sometimes people who had never met me before, large groups of people in countries I didn't really understand the cultures of. So you need a certain level of confidence for that. Now, that same finding confidence within me, I would then put into my personal life, and doming someone obviously requires a certain amount of confidence, but even just walking into a bar and meeting new people, and you need to have a certain level of self-awareness and confidence for that. So there was a link there. So even though I was telling myself the story that I really enjoyed going into work in the morning on Monday and someone saying to me, oh, what did you do this weekend? And me thinking, if only you knew. And that they were separate, there was that link. Other links, for example, when I dom someone, then there's very much this feeling in myself that I'm watching the submissives that I'm working with, and following where they're going, and understanding them. And that's exactly the same skill as I was using when I was giving presentations and training across the world. I'd be watching my audience and really understanding where they are. So I was building that empathetic connection that then was able to do my job much better. So what this really brought out in me was the fact that we have skills in our different areas of life, we have understanding of ourselves in different areas of life, and we can use them together. And I was really keen on trying to understand how BDSM and LGBT plus people can really use these skills across their lives when they can be very compartmentalized, and that's what this web series is all about. Now, the very first thing I'm going to be talking about is something called a wheel of life. Now, this is one of the most basic coaching tools that are out there, and many coaches use a wheel of life in their coaching. And the idea is you would be given a wheel like this with different spokes, and each of those spokes would have a different area of your life on it. So if I take myself, before I started to become a coach, I was in an okay career. I enjoyed my job, but there was something missing. There were certain areas that I wasn't very happy about, so they were potentially missing from my life. My finances were good. I was quite happy. My social life was okay, but because I was traveling a lot, I was missing out on certain things. My health was okay, but I didn't exercise enough. Did find that my personal growth wasn't great, and I really didn't have any room for spirituality in my life. My sexual and erotic life was probably quite good, and my relationships were where I wanted them to be at the time of my life. So immediately when you look at that wheel of my life back then, you can see straight away that there's areas for growth in spirituality and personal growth, and that's what I've been doing potentially over the last year or so. And this is a very basic tool, as I say, that many coaches will use sitting down with their clients, and it's often the first thing when life coaches work with clients in saying, okay, where do you really want to work in your in your life? Now, my problem with Wheels of Life is I feel that they don't necessarily show the links. So obviously there is a link between career and finances in Wheels of Life, and if you had no career, you would potentially have no finances. There's a link between relationships and sexuality, and actually this is one of the areas that many life coaches who don't specialize in LGBT plus people often have them at that as one thing, that relationships and sexuality is the same thing. But for many kinky people or LGBT plus people, as I say, they can be separate. And therefore, working with a coach like that, you can be more open about what you want in life. Now, first of all, going back to the worksheets that I mentioned, there's in the worksheet, the first exercise is to do your own wheel of life. So it will talk you through how to do the wheel of life. Now, I find though that just by putting things into boxes like that tells a false story about people. And when I'm coaching people, what I'm often looking for is areas that link up. So, for example, in sexuality and erotic life and relationships, they're obviously intertwined. So, for example, you could have someone who had a husband and they maybe had sex with their husband, and that'd be great. But often in LGBT plus relationships, they might have sex outside the relationship. So maybe app hookups. Now, one of the things that using a Venn diagram like this helps is then by looking at it and going, right, what does this tell me? And if I think about how satisfied I am in these three areas, can I see where I need to develop? So it could be that someone is thinking, well, actually, there's not enough of my husband in this overlap, and there's too much sex in the app area. Or it may be the other way around. It may be that the person isn't getting enough sex and wants to have more put into this overlap. So maybe they need to look at how to reinvigorate their sex life, or maybe they need, threesomes or whatever. And that's clearly a way of going forwards. It may be that someone is having great sex life but isn't having any relationships, and therefore they need to think about what skills are you using to get people for sex, and how can you help use those skills to go forwards with relationships. Or maybe there's two different areas, that career and relationships and romance, are they anything to do with each other? Well, they could be. So for example, you could have a person who had a career in Los Angeles, but they had a partner in New York. So how do you bridge that gap? Do you just use red-eye flights? and go between the two? Or do you move your relationship to your career, or do you move your career to your relationships? And things like that obviously would happen all the time. That's looking at the how your life works, but we can go to a layer above that and looking at the skills in your life. So for example, one of my clients has a girlfriend who he actually wants to leave his girlfriend, and we've been talking about different ways of how he can leave his girlfriend. But I also noticed when we were talking that he had been making people redundant, telling them they don't have a job anymore in his company. Now, they are clearly very separate things. In redundancy, it's a very legal process. In leaving a girlfriend, it's all about emotions. However, we did talk about the fact that in order to prepare himself for the conversations to tell people he was going to make them redundant, he had to do certain things. Where did he have to be? What did he have to prepare? What did he have to know about what was going to happen later? And how can that inform his conversations with his girlfriend? So we can start to look at areas that one area of our life can help other areas of our life. And it can get even bigger than that. So I'm going to tell you the story of one of my other clients. So this client has got a polyamorous relationship. So he has a wife. He also has a master, a dominant, and he has a hound to which he is dominant. So the hound is his submissive. So this complicated life, and they're all very happy in this life. Incidentally, he was very keen when I was telling the story that he wants everyone to know it's all very consensual. But there was an issue that he wasn't spending enough time with his wife. He's also very much into impact play and spanking in particular. And then he's a leader in his job. He's got a very good job, and he leads people in that job. So at the moment, those feel like very different areas of his life. But then we can start to look for the links. So for example, we've been talking about how he can increase the time with his wife, but at the same time enjoy his sexuality a little bit more. So one of the things he's been doing is, he also has a very stressful work job. We'll come back to the stress. So he goes to BDSM clubs. So if he goes to a BDSM club, he can spend time with his wife in a shared space, but because they can be playing separately, he can get the spanking and play that he wants, but separate from his wife, but at the same time, they feel like they're together. So that's a great way of joining those two. What about how to improve the time with his wife when it comes to, taking away his career, and also this stress at work? So one of the things he's found is that if he turns off his phone in the evening, he's more focused on the time with his wife, but actually it reduces his stress because he has more downtime. So by looking at that overlap there, then you can start to see, he's started to see that that's actually, by being much more intentional about the use of his evenings, he can benefit both areas of his life, other areas. And this is all about different people need different things. Now, next week, I'm going to be talking about metaphors in greater detail. And what I'm talking about with metaphors is the fact that, sorry, my screen has just gone completely blank. Right, yes, so when we talk about metaphors, in BDSM world, I've already talked about the fact that this client of mine has a master and a hound in his personal life. Now, those are just metaphors for different types of relationships. And so he can bring those into his career as well. He can use, for example, the idea of being a parent leader to his team, or he could talk about being a hero leader or a commander. And at different times, he might use one of those three different metaphors and think, today I've got to be the hero because I've got to sort this problem out, whereas tomorrow I've got to be a parent and really help my team in different ways. So we'll talk about metaphors in more detail next week. Stress relief. if he's feeling stress at work, he knows that he can get stress from spanking. And obviously before COVID, then he was able to go and plan in spanking. And that's about planning self-care. And this is becoming much more holistic in looking at his life, not thinking I'm really stressed at work, I'm happy at home, and those two things, I've only got the problem in my work life. By using the Venn diagrams, you're able to look at your life as a whole, and then really push these things together. And that's all about really intentional time management for this particular client. So in summary, with Venn diagrams, my idea about Venn diagrams for you is, or my take-home idea, is that you can look at different areas of your life and think, where are the overlaps that really help? Where are the overlaps that really hinder? Where can I move something that's an idea or a skill from one area into another that will help me live a more fulfilled life? Now, to help you through this, I've got the worksheet for this week, and that's on my website, as I say. The password for this week is overlap with a capital O. So if you download that website, that worksheet, then you will be able to go through, first of all, the wheel of life, and then a Venn diagram of life. Now, I'm aware that I said 10 to 15 minutes, slightly longer because this is the first one, and also because of my technical ineptitude in the middle. But if there's any questions, then please put them in the question and answer box. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. And I would love to hear your feedback, so please email me with your feedback, as this is the first one. And if not, then I'd love to see you back next week, when we're going to be talking about metaphors, and talking about how we can use metaphors to improve our personal lives, improve our work life, and especially leadership. And in fact, if you're running a business, how the whole business can be seen as a metaphor, or metaphors can help run your whole business. But thank you very much.